Adidas took the world by storm with the Adizero Pro Evo 1 last year, which was the $500 racing shoe that was optimized for single use. That technology has trickled down. We've already talked about how it's impacted the Evo SL, but how has it impacted their other marathon racing shoe? Today, we're breaking down the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro 4. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod. You're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Now today we're going to be talking about the Pro 4, which is what we're going to be calling it because I don't want to repeat the name over and over. But if it's your first time watching one of my reviews, you may notice some timestamps below. Feel free to jump around to the various parts of the review, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate it if you come back and watch the full thing, as I put a lot of time and effort into these videos. And if you're a returning viewer, please hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video, which is typically Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But to start off the year, we're doing daily videos. Now, as always, let's start off with some disclaimers and disclosures about this shoe, which are that I actually bought the shoe with my own money off of Running Warehouse. I did not get any discounts. I was not asked by any brands, anything like that. And as is with any of my reviews, I'm not paid for these reviews. No one watches them beforehand. No one gives me scripts. No one gives me talking points, nothing. All thoughts are entirely my own. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the intended use of the shoe. The Pro 4 is a marathon racing shoe, and Adidas actually has a lot of other racing shoes that are for different distances, and they do a better job than most brands about kind of having that delineation. That being said, a lot of people still like to use the premier racing shoes or premier marathon shoes for speed workouts and other shorter distance races, which is totally fine, and that's how we're going to be evaluating the shoe overall. Now from a price standpoint, the shoe comes in at $250, which is kind of in the middle of the price range for a marathon super shoe nowadays. Used to be really expensive, but more and more we're seeing pushes towards that $300 mark, and super trainers are kind of climbing up to that $200 mark or even exceeding it at some points. And so $250 is what is considered reasonable for a super shoe now. Now from a fit perspective, I would say that this shoe does have a little bit of an awkward fit, and it is one of those shoes I highly recommend you try on in store if possible before purchasing. Now I went true to size on this shoe and I am happy with my sizing. I don't feel the need to size up or down, but I do find that the shoe runs a little bit short. There have been some people reporting issues with bloody toes or just toe, not injuries, but discomfort with your big toe, just because, again, the shoe does feel like it runs a tiny bit short. For me, my size was okay, but I do recognize I could tell that, you know, maybe if I was on the edge of my size, it would make sense to go a little bigger. The shoe fits fairly roomy in the toe box, but it does have a little bit unique of a shape in that toe box. And so that's where even with your normal size, or even if the length is fine, you may still get some rubbing on the side. So be aware of that. But the rest of the shoe, the midfoot fits fairly snug, but is more of a standard overall fit. And then the heel is actually somewhat narrow. Now from a specs perspective, this shoe comes in at 7.1 ounces, which is 201 grams. So it is very light. I believe this is second only to the Meta Speed series from Asics, and that doesn't count the Pro Evo 1, which was, I think, around 5 point something ounces, but is another Adidas shoe. It's the single-use marathon shoe. And then from a stack perspective, you have 39 in the heel, 33 in the forefoot, and a 6mm overall heel-to-toe drop to make this World Athletics legal for professional use. But for us average and below average runners, it doesn't really matter. No one's going to be checking the legality of our shoes in our races. Now moving to the upper, you have what is called a micro fit material, and I find this to be a really nice overall experience. The material is somewhat soft. You do have a little bit of stretch, and it's very breathable without being like overly mesh-like. This ends up giving you some really good lockdown in the shoe, some really good comfort and coverage while still giving that breathability. So you're not sacrificing structure for that lightweight breathability overall. There are some reinforced points kind of in the toe box there, as well as obviously on the side with some of those overlays and details. And then you have a slightly more structured heel cup, but it is still going to be fairly soft and flexible. I think they did a good job of balancing structure as well as lightweight and staying somewhat minimal to keep the shoe very light on foot. Another thing that's kind of unique with this is the tongue is actually stitched into the shoe. So it's not gusseted, but it doesn't shift at all. It doesn't move around. And that gives you a really nice lockdown in that midfoot, where I was not shifting around in the shoe at all. I didn't need a runner's knot. I felt very comfortable. Compared to some other Adidas shoes where I did need a runner's knot, that was kind of nice, especially because sometimes Adidas tongues tend to be a little bit short. Speaking of that tongue, it is just kind of a thin, nice material. You have a little bit of cushion on top, and then with the rest of the upper, you do have some cushion there in the heel. Really, they're just trying to keep it to a minimal, but the shoe does not sacrifice comfort for that functionality whatsoever. And then there's some nice little details, hidden messages, things like that on the shoe underneath the heel tab there. Now moving to the midsole, this is where the magic happens for the most part. This is the Lightstrike Pro foam with carbon fiber rods that run throughout that midsole. Lightstrike Pro is a TPEE foam, and it is super critical, as you would expect for a racing shoe. As far as how it feels, the foam is very, very soft. I haven't run in a ton of Adidas shoes, Evo SL, Pro Evo 1, Prime Strung. So as far as my experience with Lightstrike Pro foam, this is by far the squishiest and softest version that I've tried. And frankly, this is one of the softer, squishier super shoes that I've tried underfoot. I feel like a lot of super shoes, yes, they are responsive, but they're not soft like this. They don't compress like this. And I do think that some people may not like how squishy it is, but I found it to be very, very pleasant. And the shoe itself, despite being soft and comfortable, is very fast and very responsive. And it is still rigid because you do have those carbon fiber rods. Now, for those unfamiliar, the rods are really interesting as opposed to a plate. A plate's going to be a little bit more rigid because it's just one flat piece that runs across a shoe, versus the rods kind of follow the contour, or they follow the bones of your foot. And so they should flex in a way that is more natural. At least that's kind of the thought process there. And personally, I do find the rods to be comfortable and less rigid, less harsh on the feet than a lot of other super shoes that I've tried. Now, I do find the shoe to be pretty unstable for the most part though. So you can see that there's some interesting kind of cutouts here in the midsole on the lateral side, as well as a cutout here in the medial side, or kind of like that disjointed midsole. And that does contribute again to some of that instability. Now, super shoes, racing shoes are not meant to be stable to begin with, but just keep that in mind as you're looking at options. If you are someone who needs a little bit of stability or light stability, this may not be a good option for you because it is probably one of the more unstable options out there. And I don't think I really need to speak to pace versatility just because this shoe is not supposed to be used for anything other than racing or just fast workouts. And pace is going to be relative, right? So it's not like you should look at the shoe and say like, oh, do I have to run a certain pace to run in this shoe? No, it's more about the force that you're generating. It's more about your turnover. And so if you're going to wear this shoe, just only be wearing it for your fastest events, for your marathons. If you are a somewhat slower marathon though, you may be more comfortable in something with a little bit more support, a little bit more cushion, a little bit less harsh on the feet, or a little less rigid. So something to keep in mind. The nice thing with this shoe though is that even if you are a slower runner or you're going to take a little bit longer on your marathon, I do think it's more comfortable than a lot of shoes in this category. So it may actually be a comfortable potential option even for those who are more coming up against the time cap at the end of the race. Now moving to the outsole, we have an updated GCPU compound throughout the majority of the shoe, and then you see kind of this thicker continental rubber here up front. So the thought process here is that that's where the majority of runners in the shoe are going to be landing. So you want a little bit more durability there, a little bit more of that thicker rubber. But the rest of this rubber is really, really hyper thin. Not quite as thin as that liquid rubber they used on the Evo 1, but still, I don't know how closely or how well you can see that, but that's like a really, really thin layer of rubber. And then they add some texture to it at strategic points to add some of that grip. Now, for me personally, I really like that you get a full coverage outsole, but it's still lightweight, because typically super shoes, if you're getting a full coverage outsole, you're not getting weight savings. But like I said, this is the second lightest super shoe, at least like kind of in that standard super shoe category. And so they've done a really good job with that, and I really liked it. And in my experience, I did not experience any slippage on the roads. Not saying that there wasn't any for other people. I'm not sure. I haven't heard. I don't watch other reviews. So the only thing that I see are like comments on TikToks and Instagram. But for me, the rubber did really, really good. And I've run on kind of wet roads in it as well. And so it got the job done. I know people really like the Continental rubber. I will say that in the Evo SL, the Continental rubber was slippery, that it was slick when roads were wet. And so I'm not sure how this GCPU rubber holds up in similar conditions. Now, as far as who is this shoe for, I think it's a really, really versatile marathon racing shoe, and a lot of people could benefit from using it. I think it might be easier to say who is it not for, and that would be individuals who don't like softer, squishier foams, because the foam is very soft, very squishy, similar almost to maybe the SC Elite, but honestly like a little bit more lively than the SC Elite foam, but I think softer overall than the SC Elite foam. So if you like soft, squishy midsoles, and you want to be able to run fast in them too, this is going to be a good potential option. But if you don't like that, not for you. The other thing is, if you need something that is a little bit more stable of a super shoe, I don't think that this is going to be your pick. It does, because of that cutout in the medial side, push you a little bit towards overpronation if you're not really kind of locking that in. And if you're having to hyper focus on that, that could really fatigue you over 26.2 miles. But I like that it's a 6mm drop. So if you're a lower drop runner, it's not going to be too much of a shock. If you're a higher drop runner, it's not going to be that much of a shock either. It kind of sits nicely in the middle there. And I think the only other people I'd say maybe don't wear the shoe is if you have a wide foot. I do think that that snug or so midfoot is going to give you some trouble overall. So just some final thoughts on the shoe. Overall, I really enjoyed the ride in this one. I do think it's going to be fairly divisive just because it is way on the softer side compared to a lot of other super shoes, but I think that the weight of it is really going to shine. I have put just about 40 miles on it, and I loved it on, you know, faster interval sessions. I took it on longer tempo sessions, long run sessions. I've done a little bit of everything in the speed category with the shoe, and I feel like it really handled it well. So if you're looking for a shoe that is going to make you feel light on foot, feel smooth, feel soft and comfortable underfoot, then I think this is going to be a really good pick overall. Now, if you're still here, I sure appreciate you. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notifications. And if you haven't already, leave a comment, leave a like, let me know what questions you have about the shoe or what I could be doing better or what you'd like to see more of in these reviews. And as always, I'll leave you with a question, which is, what is your preferred type of foam when running a marathon? Do you like something that's a little bit firmer, a little bit more snap, or do you prefer something that's a little bit soft, more comfortable, yet still fast? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.